All right, what's up, guys? It's good to see you again. Wes Seiler here for Conservatism on Tap. Always thrilled to be joined by my brother John. John, good to see you. It's been a few weeks.
Has been a couple of weeks. It's good to be here.
And I am thrilled to be joined by Kyle Davenport from In the Trenches podcast. Kyle, it's good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So we've been trying to get back to this for a few weeks now. This is the first time that I have been able to drink anything besides water, put that in front of the camera, probably for over a week. I got that vaccine and man, it wrecked me. Or I just happened to get wrecked right after getting the vaccine, coincidentally. I don't know which one it is. I still don't. But I've been down. My kids have been down. They missed church this morning. My wife has spent most of the day sleeping. So it's just kind of been a recovery process for the family. So this is my first chance to hang out with you guys since, man, I think it was before Easter last time we did an episode. So it's good to see you again. It's great to be doing this again.
It's been good. We are ourselves just got vaccinated. I had the Johnson & Johnson shot, which, now there's those stories being released about blood clots and stuff like that. Although I think it's like 6 in a million.
Yeah.
That it's happened to. So there has been a whole lot of work, but I've been very fascinated by, after getting the shot, looking it up, and then realizing that people have made a huge think about even just a few instances of this occurring. But it's made me kind of curious about that. Ada Sue ended up getting the Pfizer vaccine, and it put her down for just a couple of days. But it's worked out really well.
Good. How about you, Kyle? Have you gotten a vaccine yet? I don't even know. Did you ever test positive at any time over the past year, or not so much?
I didn't, and I got a little bit suspicious of it because I actually participated in a trial for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine back
kidding. Oh, wow.
I didn't know. End of October.
Yeah.
So I started wondering, you know what? I was careful and everything, but I never got a positive test, and I actually was deep blinded a few weeks ago and found out that I have had it the whole time. So the vaccine. So. Didn't really notice many side effects either from that.
Yeah.
One, so
I haven't either. Yeah, not in this first week. It didn't really put me down too much. I had like a sore arm. That was about it. But side effect wise, it was almost non-existent.
Oh man, you guys are lucky. You guys are lucky. So, and we are too, because it wasn't completely terrible. It was never life-threatening or anything like that. But when I tested positive, we were down for like 2 weeks, and it took me like a month to really get back into shape. And I don't know if that's what I had. I think my wife thinks it was like a mix of symptoms that I was like reacting to the vaccine, and I also got a cold. I have no idea, but I do know people within our extended family who have had to go to the hospital and things like that, and got pneumonia, that type of thing. So it's amazing. Like the symptoms are just all the way across the board. It's like a spectrum.
They're all over the place. Yeah.
And stuff just doesn't make sense. Like technically, even though my wife had the exact same symptoms, I tested positive and she didn't, and we've never been able to explain that. She got tested 3 times because we were like, no, you've had it, because I had it, and nope, and she didn't even have the antibodies, right? She got that test and still didn't have it. So I don't know. I'm just rolling with the punches here, but I am glad to be feeling better. And then we just introduced right before when we did this show last, I think it was 3 weeks ago. We introduced a really cool segment called Toast and Roast. We got some sound effects. We're starting to build this thing up. And this is really just our chance to be able to toast somebody out there that we approve of or appreciate. And we get to celebrate. And then also we get to make fun of somebody, which is my favorite part. So I'm looking forward to that because there's a lot of people who need a little bit of that. So toasting today, I wanted to share this with you guys is, to me, Yuval Levin is one of the best conservative writers there is today. And, just an amazing guy who's put out some fantastic work. I've had a chance to interview him on the show. I know he's been on numerous other shows as well. A Time to Build is a recent book that he wrote, From Family and Community to Congress and the Campus, How Recommitting to Our Institutions Can Revive the American Dream. And if this is a book that you are interested in getting, let me know because I'd be happy to get it for you. Yuval signed it and send it to me along with a little note there from where he works. And I thought that was just
very nice.
Cool. I got to toast Yuval Levin and his staff. I appreciate you for that, and we're going to have to get him back on the program. I'm excited to read about it because, he's done books on Edmund Burke before. He's done them on Thomas Paine and where right and left came from. And I think this book is going to be more on what do we do, right? What, given that knowledge, the different ideas that are out there, how do we actually build up the conservative idea better? So I can't wait to read it. And I'm excited to see how that can inspire us in what we do. So any thoughts on Yuval Levin, Cal?
We actually had him on in the trenches to talk about really his last 3 books. So it was back in probably December. And I highly recommend it because I've read his last 3 books, not his first one that I think was on bioethics, but his more mainstream books and several articles of his. And we had him cover a range of topics.
Yeah.
And I feel like every single topic he covered,
right.
He dropped some sort of wisdom, some new line of this new way of thinking about it. It packs so much wisdom, probably more wisdom into 45 minutes that we talked to him than any other 5 guests we've had on the show. And he's just on a different level. He was very gracious to come on. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think we could just carve out a segment every week to toasting Yuval Levin.
Yeah. I mean, exactly right. Like that. I mean, I did a 30-minute interview with him and I was just like, wow. And I think that's the coolest part is that he gets out there with podcasts and amateurs like us and jumps on there and just like, yep, cool, let's go. And he said that again, in his letter. He's like, just let me know. I'll be happy to be back on your show. And I thought that was so cool. So any thoughts there, John?
I just appreciate the interview that you had with him, Wes, where he was just – I feel like we constantly try to put Edmund Burke in, a modern perspective and how to apply a lot of his principles for just everyday living. And I just felt like Yuval Levin was just on it. It's like he was on it before we were ever on it. And he had a way of just being able to interpret those principles for modern conversations with the events that are going on today. And so I highly recommend that if you're viewing this, that you look back at the interview that Wes had with Yuval Levin and check that out.
Yeah, I'll have to post it. So there's our toast. I'm excited to be able to read that book and share it with other folks. And now we get to roast somebody. I'm pretty excited about this. So moving on to Jordan Peterson. Hopefully you guys are familiar with Jordan Peterson. That's a picture of him down there in the right. He is a confident, thoughtful, and very, I want to say, soft-spoken or gentle-speaking type of guy. Some of the things that he says liberals can't stand, but the way he says it is always just so sweet. And the irony here is that there is a writer who was putting together the latest Captain America comment who thought that, you know what? I need an ideology for the Red Skull, and I'm just going to take Jordan Peterson and everything that he stands for and has said and insert it into the comic book in glaring fashion. And now, as you can see right here, you've got Red Skull who's talking about 10 rules for life, and he's trying to indoctrinate the youth in the Captain America comment, and he's telling them that they should pay attention to chaos and order, which is like Jordan Peterson's books about how to be able to discover order in your life and run away from like things that would destroy you. And yet they're putting that in Red Skull's mouth. And then you can see the tweet here, the post from Peterson saying, do I really live in a universe where Tahishi Coates has written a Captain America comment featuring a parody of my ideas as part of the philosophy of the arch villain Red Skull? The answer to that is yes. Yes, you do. Can you imagine if they took like Yuval Levin's writing like something that, from us and was just like, yeah, I'm going to make that the villain in the actual thing. This is the guy. Coates is the writer who thought this would be a good idea. And I just want to make this clear to people who may not be familiar with Jordan Peterson. I want to show you about 2 minutes of him on a podcast the other day where he just kind of like processes through the fact that he is the villain. Take a look.
What's the story with you and Red Skull?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I came across this last week and someone tweeted me this cartoon, this comic, Captain America comic, and I saw this screenshot of Red Skull looking at a computer screen, and it said 10 rules for life. That was one text box. It said order and chaos, and there was a couple of other boxes, and I thought, well, that seems to be making a reference to my work. I mean, 10 rules for life is pretty close to 12 rules for life, and of course, the main themes I discuss are order and chaos. I mean, one book is about order and the other is about chaos, and my first book is about both. So it's a joke, associating my ideas with this arch villain, magic super Nazi Red Skull. And then as I looked into it more deeply, and as people sent me more information, it became clear that at least some of the inspiration for this Red Skull character in this Captain America variant appeared to be targeting, let's say, or satirizing or warning about my ideas. And so I've been playing with that ever since, I suppose, on Twitter. People are producing memes now of Red Skull superimposed upon the picture of him, things I've actually said, instead of the hypothetical things that the people who don't like me wish I said and then purposefully misinterpret. And so that's that. And I'm trying to make it into something playful. It's so absurd. It shocked me to begin with. I couldn't believe it to begin with, especially when I found out who the author of the comic book was. So, he's an intellectual figure among the leftist community, relatively well known, and politically correct. And I didn't expect it. It really threw me for a loop to begin with. I mean, it's really something to see yourself portrayed, let's say, parodied, satirized as I've been called a Nazi before. It's not pleasant, but this is one step beyond that. I mean, Nazi apparently isn't enough. I have to be a magical super Nazi. And,
So there you go. There you go. A magical super Nazi. So I want to get your reactions to that. I'm going to pull up a couple of those memes as Peterson has turned into this and just kind of said, you know what, that's fine. I guess I'll be the Red Skull if that's what you guys need me to be. But what are your thoughts on being categorized as a super Nazi?
Man, I feel like if we were ever compared to like the Red Skull, we'd be like wearing Red Skull masks for like the next month.
This one right
we
there.
would, like change Edinburgh to have like Red Skull on his face.
It's amazing to me because I think he thought it was kind of a joke, and then it turns out no, this is serious. This is how they see you. This is how they see conservatives, and we talked about this in our Refounding Father show that we just did. But I want to get your take because, I mean, liberals do not like Jordan Peterson. They can't stand his takes on gender and things like that. And
yeah.
I think when you get to the intellectual, which is Coates right here, that's how he sees Peterson. That's how they see corruption and evil and all this stuff. It's just sad because that's not how I see the left, right? But that's how they see it.
What's interesting, they're probably pulling a lot of that from his YouTube account, Twitter, and that sort of thing, where he's seen as a little bit more of a culture warrior, for young white men who feel left out, from, I guess, where the rest of society is going with their views. But I find like in his works, like 12 Rules for Life, he's actually a little bit more, he pulls back from that aggressive stance. And if anything, you find that he's really just trying to create a stable community.
Right.
He's really wanting men to be, and this is something that, we've been brought up with us, be better fathers, be better husbands, be better sons. He does have that view of, male and female. He plays up, the male aspect in the sense that he just feels like they're being left behind. But I don't find it as being overly aggressive, at least in his writings. Yeah. It certainly is meant to be a little bit more about stability and about finding your place. I think, with his 12 Rules for Life. Now, with his other works, I can't quite say, but that's what I've seen, and that's what I respect. But I think it's certainly been very, very misconstrued as to being this aggressive mentality about anti-feminism and that sort of thing. Even though he has a little bit of that tone, I don't think that's where his works really try to go.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Cal?
Well, I don't understand why we're roasting Ta-Nehisi Coates over this. Listen to some of the 12 rules and you can just understand how he made this connection with Red Skull and Nazism. There's just things like treat yourself like you are someone you are responsible for helping, or tell the truth, or at least don't lie, or be precise in your speech. These are some of the rules that are being parodied here. No, when I first heard this, I thought that this was I knew that Ta-Nehisi Coates was writing the new Captain America, but I thought that this was like a Babylon Bee satire article that they had like decided to turn these quotes. And I'll be honest, I've never really gotten the Jordan Peterson hype. Myself, I don't have anything against him, but I also don't really see why he gets the traction that he gets. But I mean, this is is basically satire level silly, and I'm surprised that, and at the same time, sort of not sad that I'm not surprised that this is the sort of characterization that we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree. You know, at the same time, and here's the roast, right, for Coates, is that so he thought this was a good idea to be able to attack this guy this way and to demonize him. But you know, conservatives have figured out how to handle these situations, and I think that Peterson is doing this perfect. I mean, that's what I was saying it on the previous show, is that now that Peterson is not freaking out about it or playing victim, he's actually just owning it and having fun with it, and turning it into the joke it always should have been. He is the subject of the story, and not entirely in a negative way. And so now people are clicking on him more than they are on Coates, and now he's like right back into the mainstream. And it reminds me of Dan Crenshaw, the congressman from Texas, the former special operations guy with the patch and everything, is when Saturday Night Live tried to make fun of him and smear him, he turned into it and then became a household name. And so the roast here for Coates is that congratulations, you attacked this guy too absurdly, and all of a sudden now you made him even more famous. And the more that conservatives do that and turn what was meant, to be able to destroy them into something that actually helps them, the better off we are. So that is my roast. Go ahead.
Oh no, I see that. I would imagine that the comic is more about the danger of social media and how it's used, in the fact that people can take over the platforms of social media and then use it to just create and mobilize groups that are fueled by hatred or fueled by bitterness and that sort of thing. I do get that. I just feel like now it's just so overshadowed by mischaracterizing this guy as being Red Skull. And let's face it, like as far as Marvel comics go, I feel like that, like just even that plot line of the Red Skull using social media, while it can be relevant, it's still kind of lame. Like after he's come from like the Tesseract and mind bending qualities and time bending qualities, and now he's reduced to social media, I just feel like the whole thing is just a dud from beginning to end.
Yeah. But the concern is that you get to a point where, and maybe this will happen, where conservatives are the ones that are being explicitly attacked on, media, film and media that comes out. Is it's like, hey, you see this with Gina Carano where they kick her off the show, because she's got her own opinions. But what if it goes further? Or, getting to a point where the villains are conservatives, the bad folks in the comic book are Christians or what have you, right? Like we could get to that point. But thanks to people like Jordan Peterson, it's showing that tactic isn't exactly working. So take that. All right. So that was fun. I appreciate you guys going through the toast and roast. For tonight, we don't always get the chance to talk to Cal directly and focus on his podcast as much as I'd like. So I wanted to get a chance to be able to do that with you, brother, and be able to talk about what you do. So if you want to kind of introduce your podcast a little bit more, folks, we've got a couple minutes left, and kind of talk about what you got coming up. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that Seth Root and I started a couple of years ago, just kind of on a whim, chatting on Facebook, and we ended up launching it because we felt like intellectual conservatism was not something that was very available to sort of the next coming generation of conservatives, and they were getting this sort of filtered social media, like really dumbed down, just sort of soundbite conservatism. And we really wanted to have conversations that tied these ideas back to deeper principles, that talked to conservatives who really tapped into the intellectual tradition of conservatism. And so we've been doing that for a couple of years. One of my favorite episodes is that Yuval Levin episode that we mentioned earlier on today, and a couple others that are, well, one episode that we've got coming up, or that I think we recently dropped actually, was a recording that we did with Dr. Gary Schmidt over at AEI, and he was a student of a political scientist named Herbert Storing from the 1960s, who was one of the sharpest minds. Who was
Yeah.
he was really an analyst of a lot of everything from the anti-federalists to the Constitution and the sort of American bureaucracy and that sort of thing. And he died young, and he really didn't get kind of the due that he had. He was a very sharp mind, and so we really wanted to highlight his work. And we had one of his students on. We're also working on a series, and we're looking to do more series on different topics this year. And our current series is talking a little bit about conservative jurisprudence. So we're talking a little bit about. We had Lucretia on from the Powerline blog to talk about originalism, and then we have more recently, or we're going to be talking about William Blackstone, and we've also talked with Richard Brookhiser about John Marshall, the original Chief Justice. So we're kind of getting into the core ideas behind conservative jurisprudence. How should we think about law and the courts?
Yeah,
the role there. So that's a bit of what we've got coming up, but there's 2 years worth of episodes that we encourage people to look back through.
yeah. It's just the deep topics. You're doing some of that heavy lifting and things like that. I think that's awesome. We try to do that as often as we can on this show, and especially on our solo podcast, to be able to get into those deep topics. But I love that you're doing that all the time. So, your thoughts, John?
I was just thinking that having a outlet where people can feel that they are being educated in conservative principles is just so very sorely needed.
Yeah.
I was thinking about just myself, Wes. You can probably think about a moment that you've had where you end up having like this moment where you're sitting in a classroom, you're listening to the teacher, and all of a sudden, like, it just kind of hits you like this teacher doesn't know anything. Like, in fact, most of the teachers I've had, I feel like they don't get it, and I don't feel like this is the right path for my education. So what do I do? Do I change universities? But then I don't see classes being taught of the things that I feel like are most meaningful to my life and my experience that I've had. So I'm glad that we have these areas where we can look into conservative principles and get featured for multiple topics on end, to be able to get the education and to feel like we can better ourselves in that way.
I remember one of those moments for me was being in college, and we had gotten into a bunch of conservative works, and Russell Kirk and Emmett Burke and all these others, and they were discussing human rights and how to think about them in different ways, and we were going back and forth in our group about who we landed on and all those things. And then I was sitting there in class, and the next day, and everybody in class was talking about healthcare and how it was a right, and they all agreed it was a right. And I stood up and I was like, "Can we talk about what that means?" And they're like, "Well, what's there to talk about?" I was like, "Well, how do you define a right?" And everything got quiet, including the teacher, right? And then they just moved on, like they just didn't want to go there, right? And I tried that in a couple other classes about different topics, and no one wanted to get to a point where they actually discussed what a right is and how should we think about it, because that's the assumption, right? And you think about like the liberal worldview, it depends upon this belief in rights that Thomas Jefferson gave us. It can't be questioned, and they're constantly trying to figure out ways to meet those rights in a very expansive view. And having the conservative works and the thoughts and being able to step out of that and to question it gave you something that they just didn't have. And I was like, man, this is amazing that I can actually have the intellectual and the mental ideas in my head and the power to be able to see the paradigm we're living in and to step in and out of it as I choose. And I think that's the kind of things that Kyle's doing, talking about John Marshall and going all the way back, completely different, understanding of the Supreme Court and how we got here. I mean, it's great work that you're doing, man, in that regard.
I look back and thought, I felt like it took me too long going from being a Sean Hannity conservative to an Emmett Burke conservative. And I thought, okay, what type of resource would I have wanted to have for myself at that time to get connected with these things and to do like exactly what you're talking about, to get down to the foundation and to question things about about the fundamental principles that we sort of take for granted and why they're important and why we have the institutions that we do and
Right.
how do we reform them for the better and things like that. And I'm concerned that there are too many conservatives out there stooping to that exact same level of throwing out some platitudes, throwing out some memes on Facebook, and not really, and their principles turn out to be wishy-washy because they don't understand them. And we really need to reground in the first principles and understand the intellectual tradition of conservatism in order to make it something worth holding on to. And so that's the basic premise of having In the Trenches.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, we'll have to get into some of those ideas as well in this show as well. Jonathan, you had something?
No, I just want to say that what makes Evan Burke so difficult to read sometimes, because we're just not trained for that, is just how easily he will traverse like areas of metaphysics, philosophy, political science, economics, and then right back over to metaphysics again. Yeah. And for us, we like to compartmentalize our classes, being one, this one's philosophy, this one's economics, right? This one's, classic lit. But if you're not familiar in all of them together and can traverse them all, like, you're gonna have a hard time. So the more that we can develop programs and ways to understand them, almost in an interdisciplinary sort of way, the better.
Yeah, and it takes you out of the negativity and the anger, aspects of it. Like, so that's useful, but you can't live there. And I think conservatism right now is living there. Is they're constantly triggered, they're constantly angered by the left, and they just kind of live in this world all day long where it's just one surprise or shock after another. They're constantly dismayed, and that's just exhausting at some point. And to be able to step out of that fight for a few minutes and focus on the beautiful, to focus on the good things that make life worth living. Not only is that a good thing to do in itself, but I think it also makes you better in your debates with the left, right? Is it what you're fighting for, exactly how to defend it, and you understand it. And the same thing is having those discussions with professors, being able to understand the entire worldview, right? To be able to step out of it and see it for what it is makes you much more formidable and tough, in any discussion, but more importantly, allows you to be a better human being. Allows you to be a more thoughtful and compassionate person. So you're doing that, Kyle. I love it, man. So glad to have you whenever we get you on the show. So we've got some big debates coming up here pretty soon on our Refounding Fathers show. We're starting to talk about immigration. We're talking about gun control. Got a couple other big issues. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that too, especially as we head into the next phase of the Biden administration. You start to see the changes that he's doing, and the effect that that's going to have on this country. And then especially as we start to look at what's going to be the future of the conservative movement, what is the Republican Party going to do as we start to head into elections? So it's going to be interesting to talk to that with you guys, is where do we go from here moving forward. So thanks so much for being on the show. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for the toast and roast. Enjoy your Marvel movies and do not see them in a political light at all, because that's not what they're for.
Cheers. Take care, Kyle.